So my name's Guy Odishaw. I'm going to do the Sunday service this morning, and we're going to continue in a series of talks that I'm doing. Kind of made a commitment to myself to do a year on non-dual, the perspective of non-dual reality. So that's what we'll be talking about today. What is that, and how do we begin to try and make that have some application in our life? That's the goal. But let's start with just a brief meditation and kind of let go of whatever it was that you were doing in order to get here, and just take time to arrive. So whether you want to meditate or pray or centering prayer or contemplation or contemplate what you're going to have for brunch after the service, either way. But we'll just spend some time quietly together. Begin sensing your body. And bring your awareness back into the room. I want to start this morning with an old story, straight from the traditions, a story that's been told for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And if you read Buddhist Dharma, or if you read the Hindu teachings, you've probably heard this story many times. So I invite you, whether this is the first time you've ever heard it or the 100th time you've heard it, to just settle into it and hear it again today for the first time. So the setting is ancient India, and a couple come home late in the evening, come into their house. The wife lights a small lamp, and she sees in the room a snake. And she jumps back in fear, grabs her husband, screams, "Snake!" He peers around the corner of the table, he sees it too. They're gripping each other in fear, and they back up. What to do? Surely a snake bite is the end of one or both of them. No hospital to be rushed to. What to do? So in their fear, clinging to each other, begin to calm themselves, come up with a plan. What could they do? There's something they could hit it with, something they could throw over it. Could they get to the door before the snake could get to them? No plan seems like the right plan. Paralyzed in fear, they stand in the corner. They begin to pray. Pray for some intervention. The snake will change its mind and slither out the same way it came in, leave them alone. They begin seeing that the snake is not going anywhere, staying in the middle of the room, apparently poised to attack. They confess their love to each other. It's been a good life. I hope it's me and not you. They talk about all that they won't get to do, the family they'll miss, the life they won't get to live. Angry that this could happen, scared of what will happen, hopeful of what might happen. And so all night they spend in this place, in fear and in hope and in anger, grief. Slowly, sun begins to rise, dawn, light begins to fill the room, and they realize that the snake is not a snake, the snake is a rope. And that none of what has just passed in the hours before was real, but all simply imagination from a mistake of taking a rope to be a snake. So this little allegory, this story, is the story that has been the story to explain the non-dual perspective for thousands of years. This one simple little story of what happens when we mistake the rope for a snake and all that we make out of that. And as simple as it is, it hangs together. You know? If you keep that in mind and go back to it as a reminder of what are we always doing? What is the illusion that we're making up about reality? Just like the couple made up the illusion of the snake when it was really a rope. And all that they made up about the reality of that illusion. How are we doing this every day? So that's what we want to talk about today. We're going to do some exercises later to try and look into this. How are we doing that? What am I doing every day? What's the rope that I'm taking to be a snake? And then having a whole bunch of mind about that I take to be real and I live on the basis of. We want to look into that and see. So this idea of non-dual reality, right? And so the idea here is that most of us walk around all day, every day, living in what's called dual reality. Right? Duality, polarity, this over against that. Right? For every this, there's a that. The world of opposites, the yin and the yang. Right? This is what we're always eternally doing. And the traditions tell us that although that's fine, there is another perspective that is free from that does not see the this over against that, does not see the polarity, but sees the unity, sees the wholeness, the oneness, the not-two-ness of reality, of existence. So a way to look at this, to give, again, an analogy, would be perhaps the perspective that happens, this perspective of a child, of an adolescent, of a young adult, let's say of a new parent, a grandparent, and a great-grandparent. And the change in perspective that happens as you move along that. And hopefully, if things are going well, what you're gaining is some life experience and some wisdom, so that the adolescent has a broader perspective than the child, the young adult has a broader perspective than the adolescent, the parent a broader perspective, and the great-grandparent an even broader perspective, more wisdom, more life experience. They can see more of life and understand it. But how, so we're living this. We're someplace in that spectrum, and hopefully you can see in your own life that you're at a place where you know more now. And I don't just mean know more, like you do better on Jeopardy. That's not the knowing I'm talking about. But you understand more about the world and how things go now than when you were 11. Right? I'm hoping that's the case. Pretty sure you can all relate to that. And see that there were things that you thought when you were 11, that you knew how it was in the world, that now you see were perhaps a little shallow, lacking in a depth of understanding. There's nothing wrong with the 11-year-old, you, who had that perspective. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just there was a lack of depth that you now have. It can be, so that we can do pretty easy. It can be a little harder for us to take that where we are now, that there is a somebody who has more depth than I have now. Right? And isn't this the kind of the chronic problem with receiving counsel from our elders? Is unless they're helping us do what we already want to do, we kind of don't really want to listen to what they have to say, because we know what we know, and we believe what we believe, and we believe that we think that we know, and then the opposite about them, like they don't know. I mean, that's all fine, that worked for you, but that's not how it's going to be for me, right? So we kind of have this way of refusing their wisdom. So, it's just good to notice that this happens. Just in a very normal, if we just talk about kind of normal reality, this happens. Right? That there is this migration from a lesser perspective, a more narrow perspective, to a broader perspective within your own life, but also within people. Right? There are people who just have a broader perspective. And that's true. Right? It just is. And thank goodness that there are such people that can help us see what we can't see ourselves. Right? So the same thing is true, but if we go beyond just people, right, to say that there are these perspectives on reality, right, that are given different names, but the way it's been translated out of the traditions into English are the words that are used are gross, subtle, causal, and non-dual. So these are perspectives. Right? So gross is a certain perspective that we would say is perhaps, in our analogy, closer to the perspective of the child. Right? And subtle is a larger perspective, and causal is even a larger perspective, and non-dual is the idea being it is the largest perspective, the all-inclusive perspective. Right? And that we move along the spectrum of consciousness from gross to non-dual. And as we move, our perspective expands. What we know and perceive and can relate to in reality grows as we move. And the goal of the traditions, all the great traditions, is to get us to this non-dual perspective, to be able to see reality as it is. In our example, it is to be able to see the rope, right? To be able to see the rope and realize the mistaken snake. Right? And so this is an interesting thing, right, to say, as we struggle with this, right, about take it out of our analogy of the rope and the snake into the world and life, and we start to apply it to ourselves. There's a common misperception that happens, right, which is this idea that if we say that the reality, relative reality from the gross perspective, the one that most of us walk around having all day, if we say that that's an illusion, and that illusion can disappear, then we think that the world disappears, right? And philosophy is full of this idea that if in the pursuit of spirituality and I see through the illusion of reality that nothing will exist, everything will cease to exist. But that's not the case. Because again, in our example, the illusion that disappears is the snake. But the snake was never there, right? There was never a snake in order to disappear. There was always only just the rope. The rope doesn't disappear. The rope is there. That's actual, right? There's actually something there. It's just the illusion that something was something else. So all that goes away is the mistaken object, that which never was. Right? So this is true as we change our perspective from a gross to a subtle to a causal. Right? That reality doesn't disappear. There is a reality that's out there. There is a substratum of a reality. There's a something which we are constantly having an illusion about. We're in a case of mistaken identity about it. We're caught in this kind of magic trick, taking the illusion to be reality. So as we see through that, we just stop seeing the illusion. We realize that the illusion was never there. So it doesn't really go away like the snake. There was never a snake, so the snake can't go away. You see through it. And you realize that there's just a rope. And this is how it goes for us as we change. So, important to keep that in mind as you work on this in your own life, because the mind will struggle with this. The more personal your work gets, the more personal the illusion, the more you feel something is at stake, the more your mind is going to play tricks on you. And this is, again, where this nice, simple example of the rope and the snake comes in, and you just remind yourself, right, the snake was never there. It's just a rope. And then you can apply that to a more complicated situation. So, in the idea of an illusion, what comes to my mind always is, watching a magician on stage, whether they're pulling a rabbit from a hat, or making a car disappear, or sawing a woman in half, right? We know that it's a trick, right? It's not real. It didn't actually happen, right? It's an illusion. We've been tricked. But just like the snake and the rope, in seeing through the magic act, the magician doesn't disappear. The stage doesn't disappear, the props don't disappear, the audience all there with you watching it doesn't disappear, right? That's all there. That's all part of reality. The only thing that disappears is the mind that was tricked, and then in believing the trick had all kinds of thoughts about it, right? All the kinds of thoughts that are based on, oh my goodness, they just made a car disappear. Where is it? Where did the car go? Wherever the car reappeared, what if it landed on somebody? Right? I mean, the mind can come up with all of that, right? But that's what goes away, is all of that thinking that is associated with the mistake, right? The mistake is the believing in the trick, believing the illusion. That was the mistake. That's where we went wrong. And when we can see that and we see through that, and we realize that everything associated with that was untrue, unnecessary, based on an illusion. Just like the couple who had all of their fear, and they had their prayers and their hopes. All of that mind and emotion was based on an illusion that didn't exist. It has no basis. So it must go away, just like with the realization, right? You can imagine. I'm sure you've had a moment like this, right? Maybe you think you have something crawling on you. You ever had that moment? You're like, oh, something in my hair. And you have that, and you realize there's nothing there, and then you can kind of laugh at yourself and realize you're in no imminent danger of being bit by something, right? So it's just the same way, right? So I say sometimes we have to get the joke of it, right? That's the idea. We have to get the joke of the mistaken identity. The illusion we've taken to be true, and all that we've built up based on that. When we see through it, one of the first things that happens is one laughs. You laugh at the great joke that has been played on you. And then maybe comes, some anger and some other emotions after that. But usually the first response is laughter when you get the joke. So that's what we want to do. We want to try and get the joke of our constant mistaken dual reality, and the this over against that, and that all of the arising of our mind, all of the emotion we put into it, that we take that to be real and true. We take that to be reality when it's not the case. So the truth is non-separateness. That's the truth. So in the Christian tradition, they would say original sin. And the definition of original sin is the belief in being separate from God. So to put it in theistic terms, the belief in being separate from God. So in the non-theistic tradition, so in some forms of Buddhism and some forms of Hinduism, it's not separate from God, it's separate from reality. That somehow I as a person am separate from reality. And that's the illusion. That's the first mistake, right? That's the taking the rope to be a snake and then basing everything on that. And that's what we've done. I've taken myself to be separate from reality. That's the illusion. And then everything that I have done from that point forward is just me believing the illusion. Living on the basis of a mistake, or what the traditions they call avidya, wrong knowledge. So the first bit of wrong knowledge is separateness. And then everything we do after that is just the action, whether it's thought, emotion, belief, actual action in the world, right? All coming under the term action, is based on avidya, or wrong knowledge. And the traditions are nothing other than coming to see that that's the case. Right? To direct you to right knowledge, direct knowing. And in that moment of direct knowing, of seeing the truth, there's the recognition of the illusion, and then the laughing, and then the crying, and then the recovery. So I want to take some time this morning. We're going to take a little bit more time than usual to do some exercises. We're going to get a chance to see if you can find this in yourself. There's certainly a lot that can be said about this topic of non-dual reality and separateness, and there's a large amount of teaching about it. But the problem is that the teaching is actually part of the dualistic side of reality. So even the teaching, the most penetrating, clear, coherent, revealed teaching is also part of the illusion. So it's valuable in helping us come to see that there is the possibility of this illusion that needs to be seen through. But the most valuable is your actual seeing through it. In the end, that's the only thing that actually can liberate us from the illusion, right? Is seeing, through the light of consciousness that it's just a rope. And then the spell is broken. That's the only thing that actually does it. Right? So let's take some time and see if we can bring the light of consciousness to our own illusion and have a moment of seeing the rope. Right? So I'm going to give you a series of questions. And those of you who have done this before know that it's typically just one question that you ask each other repeatedly. But today is going to be a little more complicated than that. You're going to have 3 questions that you'll ask in a row, and then repeat those 3 questions. And I'll go through that for you. But I say that, and I see already the folks who've done this before are reaching for their notebooks, which is great. Anybody who might happen to have an extra piece of paper in their notebook that maybe wants to write out the questions a couple of times, could share, that would be great. I will also repeat the questions as often as needed, even during the exercise. Let me read these to you. So I'll give you the questions, then I'll talk about the exercise, how it's done. I see a few folks, new folks that are starting to blanch a little bit. This is painless. Some people actually enjoy it, so it'll be okay. So here are your questions. Tell me something you believe about reality. Tell me something you believe about reality. So this is your version of the snake, right? This is what you're gonna give, something you believe about reality. It's already an illusion, so that's the snake. What do you make out of that? It's the second question. What do you make out of that? So, like our couple in the story, they see the snake and they make up the whole story of the fear, their life, what that means, the confession of their love for each other, their pray for help, making arrangements for their death, missing the family that they're not going to get to see in the event of their imminent death. This is what they made out of that, right? So this is what you'll look to see. What do I make out of that? Whatever your particular piece of reality that comes up is. Third question. What if that were not true? What if that were not true? So this is an invitation to ponder seeing the rope. Having seen the snake and made up a whole reality based on it, and then seeing the rope, what might happen? What change might take place? Right? How would you be if you saw through the illusion? Right? So this is all, so tell me something you believe about reality. What do you make out of that? What if that were not true? Those are the three questions. And the way you'll do the exercise is you'll get into groups of two. There'll be a certain amount of time given for each person, right? And we'll keep the time. I'll keep the time, so you don't have to worry about it. So one partner will go first, and you'll ask your partner the first question. They'll answer. You'll ask them the second question. They'll answer. You'll ask them the third question. They'll answer. You'll say thank you, and then you'll ask them the first question again, and then the second question, and then the third question, and then you'll say thank you. And you'll do the same thing. So we call it a repeating question, only in this case it's repeating questions. Right? And then when the time is up, and again I'll have a timer, I'll let you know it's time to change, and the other person will ask the person who was just doing the asking the questions again. First question they answer, second question they answer, third question they answer, you say thank you, you ask the questions again. Right? So excellent question. So when doing these questions, there's a process here that we're engaging in, that you're being invited to engage in. Right? There's a methodology here that is not really about the questions or about the answers. Right? That's the structure. to invite the opportunity. So, what you want to try and do is your partner asks you the question, and you just respond with whatever's there. You want to try and let go of any attempt to take this on as a rational exercise. Like this is a test, and they're asking you a question, and if you get the right answer, you'll get a prize, right? That's not the setup. But many of us will just bring that mind to it because it's what we're used to, right? Questions need answers, and the answers are right or wrong, and somebody's keeping track, and it'll go better for me if I'm more right and less wrong, right? We all have that as just a gestalt, right? So it's good to just see that, even name it, right? When the first person asks you the question is, tell me something you know about reality, something you believe about reality, and you can say, I hate tests. Okay, great. So you just want to respond with whatever is coming up, which can have something to do with the question, or can have nothing to do with the question, right? Like, they ask the question, you're like, I think I locked the keys in the car. Okay, if that's what was there. Right? So part of the exercise is being with yourself, being present to yourself as you're arising during the exercise. Right? That's part of the exercise, is being present to yourself, not being strategic and stuck up in mind, but open to the room and your body, your physical self, your emotional self, your mental self, your energetic self, your spiritual self, however many layers of self you presume to know, to be in relationship with. You want to be open and sensitive to all of those. And the question is just, it's like a knock on the door, right? But we don't necessarily know what door the question's going to knock on. Your emotional door, your mental door, the door of memory, the door of your soul, right? But you want to stay open to the possibility that question could knock on any one of those doors, and then you want to answer from there. And then the second question comes, and it's the same way. It's what comes, right? And it might pertain to the first answer, or it might not. But if you're just being present, this is the alchemy of the exercise. It's the power of presence, not the power of your thinking. So the more you can surrender to the presence and let the exercise flow, you may have the opportunity to be pleasantly surprised by the part of your nature that arises. So that's the invitation, is to be present. And also, you may learn something about yourself, and that can be helpful in the process of self-understanding and deconstructing the ego and the separate self, the mind that surrounds it, right? That can be helpful in that process. But there's another part of the process that is much more important, and that is having an authentic encounter with yourself. And that's a possibility if you just let yourself be present to what's arising. Okay? So we'll break into groups. So go ahead and do that. I just want to say a few things in closing here that this is a demanding task. This suggestion that I've brought forward here today of, like, hey, there's this way of seeing reality, this dualistic way that we're all doing all day, every day. And then there's this other perspective of this non-dual, and that everything that you think from over here in this perspective is just an illusion and is avidya, or wrong knowledge. And there's this other perspective over here which is not that. And you should let go of this one and have this one, right? Although that is the ask, that is the ask of the non-dual school and all the traditions that are about the liberation of the self. I think we definitely want to respect the process, respect that this is significant, and have compassion for ourselves as we do this, and not not be too aggressive, not too judgmental, be gentle. When you see yourself, or more likely the case, where you might see another operating under an illusion, right? The illusion of, say, like, they're angry at you, and you want to answer with, that's just an illusion. Right? It's not me you're angry at. I'm a rope, you're seeing a snake. Quit it, right? I mean, you may be tempted to do that with your newfound knowledge. I suggest you don't. It will rarely go well for you. Obviously these things are easier to see in others than in ourselves, but you might want to keep that to yourself and just let that be your own inner teaching and awareness to inform you about how you're being, but you can't see yet. But mostly, I just want to say this is a big ask. This is it is one of the most revered teachings, the non-dual teachings, and we don't see it much in popular culture, and for good reason. So, to just be gentle with it, and most importantly with yourself, but also playful, right? You can do this in a way that is really simple and loving to yourself and to the world, of just throughout your day, with just this gentle questions that we gave today, of looking to see, where are you doing this? Where are you taking reality to be a certain way, and then making up a whole reality in your mind based on that? And then you could bring to that just not what if, right? What if that's not true? Because that's a really gentle way, but it allows like an either or, right? The better way is just, it's not true. Like, you can just assume that you're doing it. You can skip right past the what if and just go to, where's the illusion here? Where am I doing this? And just moment to moment throughout your day. And just slowly and gently undermine the momentum of the separate self. And in slowing that momentum, becoming degrees of free from it, it creates a space in which you could then see actual reality. If you start to slow the illusion, create a space where you could have an actual encounter with reality. And, that's it. That's the process, just like that.